When my father, the late Colonel Manning, passed away in 2014, it took 4 or 5 carloads to get everything out of the house. And that got me thinking. Got me thinking that I needed to do what I've termed a legacy project. I determined that if something happened to me, I don't really want my kids having to sift through 40, 50 crates of stuff, most of which will end up in a skip. And even the expensive stuff, you'll be lucky if you get pennies on the pound from an auction or an auctioneer. So, with that in mind, I had a big clear up of books and everything that I have in my studio. And I already had one of these about 6 or 7 years ago after my cardiac event. And, I cleaned out loads of stuff. And I just said, I really don't want my kids, if I'm to pop my clogs, going through everything, going, is this sentimental? Is that, whatever. I decided, here's a box, and these are the sentimental things. And I've been brutal with pretty much everything else. And then when it comes to the whole library, it's going to charity or it's going to a skip, whatever. However, this, believe it or not, for those of you who know me, you know I love broadcasting and I loved Gay Byrne. However, somebody got me that a year or two ago. And if I'm honest, I never looked at it at all. I mean, Gable was one of a kind, with the exception of maybe of Jerry Ryan, maybe a little bit of Marion Finucane, but that's where it stopped in Ireland as regards people talking to people. So that book, it caught my eye and I said, I don't need this. And I threw it on the pile. And it's pristine. However, I opened it at one point, literally just open it, because it's full of letters, as you know, from listeners to Gabo. It's called Dear Gay. And I couldn't believe the outpouring of angst that existed in Irish society, and I'm sure still does to this day. So, as I flicked through it, there were very, very, you could identify with people's, inner angst, and especially back when we had a kind of cloistered society. So there were tales of the usual kind of life travails of infidelities or loneliness or meanness or solitude, whatever. But people, at the end of the day, were suffering. And Gabo was their great kind of outlet. And in that outlet, they suddenly realised, hey, I'm not the only one in that boat. And I wonder to this day how many people suffer in silence and not realise that there are so many people going through the same thing. And God, I said to myself, it's a pity there's a void in radio these days for that kind of a catharsism, if you like. And then a part of me said, well, that society's gone to a degree. Because of the internet, I suppose. So there's a greater awareness of information out there, and you can see a lot of people are in the same boat. But, and also because of the social mores of the times we're in. And yet, I believe people are just flesh and bone and soul and need other people. Hence you see all this kind of social media. People are looking for validation constantly all the time. So it's like it's an insecurity. But I think even as we advance towards times now, people are looking less and less and don't seem to care anymore. They don't care. It's almost like an apathy has set in. Where am I going with this? Well, they just don't make them like they used to in terms of broadcasters. whatever Jerry Ryan had, or Gay Byrne had, or Terry Wogan indeed had, tapped into something. And it's either something that still exists, which it probably does, which is human nature, or maybe has just been eroded. And the erosion of that has been helped, it has to say, by the level of broadcasting standards we have now, which are pretty much non-existent. They fall into banal, trivial categories of broadcaster who will go along to get along and not say anything at all that is going to be in any way contentious. We need to look, I mean, for instance, if we look at our own Late Late Show, I'm sorry, but it is Late Late Light. Now, I'm saying as well, in fairness to Paddy Kilty, times have probably changed. But whatever that was back then that tapped into people, and I'm talking radio mainly, it's the intimacy of radio, and also you focus on radio like you don't really focus on any other media, as I said, in an intimate way. And the other kind of broadcasters kick into kilter this kind of either a government narrative or a right-on narrative of political correctness or wokeism or whatever. And it's a tragedy. And the fucking reason it is a tragedy is that people still, despite all these outlets, are still suffering in silence. And the only thing that will alleviate that suffering is when they hear the voices of their fellow citizens, friends, families in an anonymous fashion, so that they can just say to themselves, well, it wasn't just me after all. So, it won't be going anywhere. It is a great cultural document, not just of Irish society, but of people's lives.